Yeah, and I guess, and we talk about the complexity of the Mike Pence speech, and I think probably from being in the military, you have respect for the office or the
The
leadership,
position over the
position,
personality.
and maybe call me brainwashed or whatever. I mean, it.
That's simply it's civility and have some class. I think you have your viewpoints, fine, all right, but you make yourself to the adults in the room look lesser when you stoop to that level of walking out or turning your back. I'm going. You haven't even heard what the man had to say.
And at the end of the day, they win. That's it.
Well, exactly. Mike Pence didn't hardly acknowledge it, so he came out smelling like a rose.
Yep.
And meanwhile, these kids that are tearing up Berkeley, which is always smart to me. Yeah, tear up your own community. That's good. Yeah. So, I think we'll move on here to our third and final segment. But overall, I feel like they lost, and maybe they feel differently. Maybe that was the crowning moment of their life, is walking out on Vice President Pence. And back to the central issue here, maybe that would be the greatest achievement ever. Is Bill Maher lost his job? Okay, but where does that go? So he doesn't have He doesn't have a right to have a blog anymore, to have a podcast. I mean, what? You just want him off HBO? Well, you have to subscribe to that, so don't watch it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's at what cost? At the cost is the First Amendment.
Yep. It's that someone said something, and
I don't like.
The other crazy part is it wasn't in hate. It wasn't.
No, it was in poor taste.
It was in poor taste. It wasn't in hate.
We're not talking about Uncle Ruckus, who was like, "Don't trust them new N words over there." You know,
it wasn't a David Duke.
No
rhetoric. No.
Exactly. This wasn't David Duke talking. We're talking about a hard leftist here for the most part. Yeah, he made a bad joke, but I'm going. So you're going to eat one of your own, basically.
Yeah.
Because as an impromptu guy, largely ad libber, yes, at the cost of the First Amendment, it's absurd. So, yeah. I mean, again, I'm sure we'll touch on this again. I'm offering this up. We're posting up a mailbag this week, and I'm going to offer this up. I'm sure we'll get some interesting thoughts about this. But just so everybody's clear, it was a reprehensible word to use. It's antiquated. I'm more on the lines of Oprah. If it's that controversial, and again, there's 12 different standards on this one word. It's got to be great learning English if you're from a different country. You're like, wait a minute, so what? You can say it when and here if you're from what? So, but...
Well, all right, Bill, I was going to say, Bill Maher gave us a fine example of when and how not to use it.
And yes, to me, it was poor taste, but again, it wasn't a hateful thing. But I certainly do understand the apprehension from men like the Reverend Al Sharpton. I get
it.
Yes. So we're condemning the sin, condoning the sinner here, if you will.
Sure. I'll tell you. I hope he keeps his job. I hope it keeps going because we need that. Well, we talk about ModState. It's all the proverbial ideas to the table, and aside from that one thing he said, I think everything else.
Funny. I mean, he can be an ass at times. I've actually, in the interest of full disclosure here to our viewers, I've told you this, but I've actually heard back from Dr. Duke's office twice. So we brought him up, and by no means am I extending an offer to him. We're talking, third round of talks here. I'm by no means extending to him an offer to come on our podcast and/or do an op-ed so that he can eschew or spew venom.
Yeah.
The goal is I would like to have this man who is very well learned. I would like to have him clarify. Well, okay, so in this election you were railing against black people. This time it was just Jews. Like, what's your deal, man? And I'm from Metairie, Louisiana, which is the west central portion of New Orleans. It's unincorporated, but it's where the Saints are headquarters. They practice a few miles away from me, and it's in Jefferson Parish. We don't have counties down here. Well, that's the same parish that David Duke is from. So it's a particular interest, for us. But by no means is he being invited on to spew hatred or violence. We're not going to permit that, obviously. Well, we are interested in hearing his overall societal opinion.
I was going to say all nonviolent viewpoints.
Right. He's not going to be permitted to say any of that, but he is going to be permitted. I'm curious. Okay, what what is your end game here? I mean, are you Charles Manson? Or, you know, what's the deal? You think Dylan Roof did the right thing? You know, I want to ask him.
That's why I asked the questions about abortion, and I think it's how we move forward. And I'm not saying he's going to move us forward, but at least we can ask the questions.
We can say that, hey, he had a platform to speak. I mean, we've already had a self-proclaimed white civil rights leader do an interview on ModState, and he wasn't some foaming madman. His central point was that, okay, well, Asians and Africans and everybody else could be proud of their heritage. Why can't I be openly proud of my European heritage? And I said, okay, fair enough. All right, the logic is sound, whether you agree with him or not. The logic is there.
Sure.
So that's the kind of thing that I would like to offer Dr. Duke the platform to say. He is educated, and I'd love the insight, but we'll see what he says. It's the third go round I'm talking to his office. So I mean, I don't know what the deal is. Whatever.
I would. I would. I'll be there. I would like.
Yeah.
I'd have some series of questions to ask.
And we will treat him with the same dignity that we'll treat any other guest, and let him say, speak. There's no other. We don't do gotcha journalism. There's no other reason to have him on here. And who knows? He may listen to this and go, "Man, screw these guys." And I wish Dr. Duke the best. I wish he would change it. I wish he would repent and change his hateful thinking.
Exactly. Which may or may not segue us. Let's see what I did there.
Speaking of neo-Confederates.
And I'll tell you, this is, I think, where the North meets the South. And quite frankly, I think I just don't. I'm not around it historically. So we had talked about Confederate monuments. And
right here again in New Orleans.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of the majority of people in the United States, or not majority, but a huge number of people in the United States, this just doesn't affect. And, I mean, it doesn't affect me, where I'm from, and I've been stationed in Hawaii, and Texas really doesn't have any of that historical reference like it does in New Orleans or
right. I mean, they did secede from the Union, but Dallas wasn't even on the map until Kennedy got killed. So,
and quite frankly, if they could be their own country, they'd like to be. So, but
they are. Texas is southern when it's convenient. Texas is Texas.
So there has been stuff in the news about what we need to do, or what we should do with Confederate monuments and those individuals who are represented in our cities as monuments for their role or whatever role they had in the Civil War.
Right, and this is going to be one thing you're going to have to pick a side and die for it here. So,
sure, man.
Read this. You're going to have to. I'm going to put you there. What is finish? Set up for us frame the issue, but then what's your call here?
So, look,
frame the issue.
You totally asked me this question, and I was like, man, I think I'm inclined to say that what they represent is not right, which is a segregated country in slavery, and with that knowledge, I think that we should relocate them or take them down and not them be a main staple in our major southern cities. That's the northern perspective. That's the rather uneducated, non-historical viewpoint. I think, so if I were to just pick a side, I would say, let's take them down. Let's take the Confederate flags down. Let's take those monuments down, because I'm not trying to erase history, but I'm also, I don't think that they should be paraded in front of the general public.
Right, and a caveat here, too, as both veterans here, and I had to remind a number of my Marines of this. Yes, I was in the Navy, folks, but I was a corpsman. Marines don't have their own medics, so I was a corpsman as a combat medic with the Marines. So with that, I had to remind them of this. Yeah. From our perspective of having sworn the same oath the president does to defend this country, its constitution, its people against all enemies, foreign and domestic, the Confederacy was a defeated rebel government. They were traitors. Okay, and yes, George Washington was viewed by the English as traitors. That's fine. I didn't serve the English government. I didn't serve the CSA. I served the United States, and regardless, my father's family is from Pennsylvania. He was born in Pittsburgh, so I guess I would have been wearing blue because I would have gone with my state. This is not me hating on the South here, okay? We're not the Confederacy. It is there, and these were people that, for whatever reason, we could. That's an entirely different series of podcasts.
Yeah.
That I don't see us doing. But the point is, they were traitors from our perspective, and it tore this country apart. It was the most tragic conflict ever in our history, brother against brother. And at the end of the day, I completely get the feelings of black leaders, my black neighbors that I've talked with here. I've spoken with them extensively, both parties, black civil rights groups and my black neighbors about this, and I understand the feelings. A caveat I'll give here is the danger in destroying or completely removing from sight anywhere, like the existence of these monuments, to me is like is like I mentioned to you earlier, the whole concept of doing away with Auschwitz memorials or whatever, or not whatever, but Holocaust memorials, because I feel that sets us up in the future where kids don't know about it, it's not there, so we're free to repeat those same mistakes. Because let's not to get spiritual here, but to go back in the Old Testament, the Hebrews built monuments and the word was, of course, different, but the concept was not a glorification of something. They built monuments. They set up huge mounds of stones to warn them, don't go this way again. There'd be giants or whatever.
Yeah.
When they were conquering the Holy Land. So to me, I look at these monuments in that sense. It's more than a black and white issue. It's
sure.
It's more complex than that.
So I realize it's complex. I don't mean to cut you off because
no, please do.
I mean, I part of the military studies I did at U of M. I did an independent study on the Civil War and why people fought on the side that they did, and to be very clear, and I'm sort of in a way building up your argument that the majority of these people that fought in the Civil War weren't slave owners.
They
were laymen, and the reasons that they actually fought weren't necessarily based in ideology. They were based in really the major reasons were duty to the unit and to that person, and the shame associated with retreat and not fighting. And for like Robert E. Lee, for example, I think in some cases he actually freed his slaves before everything started, and he was actually granted a leadership role in the Union Army, but was beholden to Virginia where he lived, and that's why he went. And it just so happened that Virginia voted to secede from the Union, and that's where he wound up. So it's complex, and when you look at someone like Robert E. Lee, he is a huge historical figure in the United States history. I mean, he is inextricably tied to George Washington's family. They're
related.
So
they left land to those, and to me, he was a gentleman. It's difficult, from my understanding. I don't think it's the same thing as Nathan Bedford Forrest.
No, absolutely not. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Robert E. Lee's house or is actually on or was the property.
Mount Vernon is.
Well, that's George Washington, but I think Robert E. Lee's family is tied to the Arlington National.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what all they were. Besides the point, but
yeah. Anyway, the fact is that these are historical figures, and I don't necessarily believe, and I see the argument that you make that we shouldn't necessarily try to erase these people from history. Yet, when you talk to your black neighbors, your African American neighbors, what they see in these monuments is something that
that's more complex too.
It doesn't hit me to the core the same way it does them. And so what I would like to see, if we're going to keep these things in place, is some sort of education that, look, this is what happened. This was the ideology of the South. Not everybody fought for this ideology. So we need to build up education instead of just...
Well, let's do that for a moment. I want to clear up, there's misconception on the side of not necessarily pro-Confederates, but people that were in favor of keeping the monuments there exactly where they were is, number one, these were not monuments that were erected during or in 1866, during the war or immediately afterwards. These were erected by organizations associated with the Sons and Daughters of the Confederacy that, and one of the, I forget the exact which one, I don't know if it was to Beauregard or which monument. I can, if anybody wants to write in and ask, I've got the Times-Picayune our paper's article here when I can look at it, but one of them was specifically dedicated to the supremacy of the white race. Okay, not the cause of the Confederacy. That was their labeling of it. Okay, and
so then you can't. I mean,
you can't defend that.
No.
All right, and so, but the response from some of my black neighbors was more complex in the sense that a couple felt that that was in a way a slap in the face because it's as if as a guy I went to boot camp with who wrote several glorious and beautiful works. Dane Wilson, he wrote his columns in regards largely to Black Lives Matter. He phrased it beautifully that this is the land I want to pursue, the pursuit of happiness in the land that my forefathers built with the sweat of their own backs and brows. It was a beautiful way to put that. And there was an expression of, well, okay, it's kind of a slap in the face because what are you trying to say that my forefathers didn't build this land with the sweat of their brows by removing these monuments? So my personal opinion here, and I know this is not going to necessarily sit well with everybody. There's no way to please everybody here. I can't be all things to all people. I'm not going to try. I personally feel like the city of New Orleans, yes, it was the epicenter on the Mississippi River of the slave trade. Okay, Mark Twain wrote what he did based on that fact. Okay, so we had that, but I would also like to point out, we mentioned the French cities. France was one of the most progressive nations in outlawing, being amongst the first to go against slavery, and Napoleon Bonaparte was vehemently against it. So with that, I think that the monuments, like our mayor Mitch Lader mentioned a while back, that we should set up a park, name it, if you want to say in memory, not in honor of, because it was an enemy state, but in memory of the sacrifices of the Confederacy, fine. Move it there to that park. I just have a problem with, because of the perception. We say perception is reality, so let's be consistent here. If perception is reality, I just have an issue as a native New Orleanian of having these symbols at the forefront in 4 different prominent places in and around the French Quarter. I just, that representation, that image, I'm not saying destroy it, but does it have to be right here?
Well, and that's where, again, it's like let's redefine what it is, and I think a lot of people will be pretty happy with that. It's just sort of like, does the Confederate flag need to be flying outside of state capitol buildings? Probably not, but that was happening, and so that's a reaction. So the reaction then is, well, if we're flying it for these presumed reasons at the state capitol building, then that means that we automatically believe that all these monuments downtown in New Orleans by the quarter mean the same thing. And I don't think they do, because it is a lot easier to bring down a Confederate flag than it is to knock down a monument.
Well, and also, I have to remember there were a number, and there was an article in the paper here, there was a number of individuals, ironically, from the North where Confederate flag, this is recent now, Confederate flag sales went up to the roof in places like Amazon and geographical tracking. And there were Black Americans and actually several Islamic Americans, Muslim Americans that came down here and protested alongside some of the neo-Confederates, saying this is an issue of censorship. Now, that was a completely different angle that I looked at. I guess in a way it makes sense because erasing history, censorship, but it was more complex than just
Sure. The entire thing is complex. I mean, the Civil War was intensely complex, and I mean that. I throw it out here, Dan Carlin. If you want to do a podcast on hardcore history on the Civil War, it would be a great service to this world, and your entire podcast is a great service to this world. But I just think, just based on my small independent study that I did, it's just so much more complex, and I'm not ready to erase that history. I just think there needs to be some education surrounding what those monuments mean, and very specifically, like if it is a monument that is dedicated to the white race being supreme over all, that's problematic. But if it's a statue of Robert E. Lee or one other Confederate general to really make I mean, it's sort of like, if you've ever been to Gettysburg, it's the most sombering place you could ever be. It's just a massive graveyard, and there is monuments to both the North and the South, as there should be, because it was our brothers, it was our people, our ancestors, not too far removed, who fought there for fundamental reasons that weren't the ideology of slavery. It was very geographical, and it was
right. We have to remember the for whatever reasons, the thousands of black freedmen that fought for the South. We also have to remember the last Confederate general to surrender, Standing Watie, was a Native American. The Oklahoma Territory seceded, and most Native Americans groups around the time sided with the Confederacy. So do with that what you will, but that definitely muddies the waters. And this is one of those areas again. Do I really want to sit at Cafe Du Monde having coffee and beignets with my friends? And Joan of Arc is one thing, but that really is disconcerting when you are sitting there, say, with a friend of yours who is black, and there's a monument right down the way that somehow or another can be construed to memorialize their ancestors being enslaved. That's the perception.
Sure. And
that's troublesome.
And again, that specific thing, I will never feel to my core. Like, that will never, I'll never really understand what
we can sympathize, but we can't empathize.
Yeah, I will never, I'll just never know what that is. And so that maybe will conjure a different feeling. And again, I'm not saying that I want to know, but I do recognize that. And so it just plays into the complexity of what those are. So, but
it does. And we're going to have, as we wrap this up, we're going to have sooner rather than later our app. We've had it ongoing since September, but we're prepping it for release for Windows 10 and Windows Phone. It's going to go to Apple, to us, and we'll be able to, obviously it's going to be the site and the mobile package, but also the podcast. And it's actually something that we've invested a lot of time, not a great deal of capital yet, but a lot of human capital in pushing for the multimedia perspective. We want to have a 1-to-1 ratio, a 50-50 ratio of editorial product and multimedia. And we've had some gaps since our April 30th reboot on our 1-year anniversary. Some reformation in the classical sense of the word of the staff and where we're going, what we're doing. But it's finally coming to a head here in the best possible sense, with a lot of these things coming to fruition. And I think we've got a lot of good in store overall. I'm very encouraged with where we're heading with this. I mean,
so more to follow. I think wrap this up. We've been rocking at this about 90 minutes, and I'm impressed. Probably we're looking to shoot about one a week out. I think that's what we said to start with.
Right. We may end up doing more, especially as we get going with the web/video cast. But
and then you can look. As of right now, we'll be under ModState for the podcast, and we're hoping that we'll have it up on iTunes pretty quickly. If you're listening to it, you probably got it at least there. But I think we'd like to crowdsource and come up, see what people like for the name. And I don't know, do we want to put those out there right now or?
Yeah, feel free.
So we were looking at Current State of Despair or Politicel. So those are the two we're thinking right now. And if you're with us on the first podcast or the reboot of the podcast, then I'd happy enough to extend the vote out to you or some feedback. But
right, we're gonna put out the mailbag again. Like I said, I've got an addition, from letters we've gotten in and social media. We'll put it up there as well, and we are going to be, as well as human capital. Like I said, we're going to be putting some social media marketing dollars into this. So we're rebooting in a big way, and ModState, it's going to be more prominent. But we'd like your help with the name, and if there's something, you're going, no, it's this, idiots. Well, then please, by all means, tell us that name, what you think. We'll be happy to give you credit if you opine to us about it. Overall, I think it's going to be good because we're going to continue. We're going to continue to touch on things that, yes, are going to be sensitive, that are going to be controversial, but that's one of the biggest problems is the lack of dialogue. We have our own echo chambers, and we want our safe spaces. We want our rallies, our people, those people over there. It's like, listen to the David Bowie song Fashion and you got it.
Yeah.
So basically, that's what we're trying to not do. And we can't be all things, all people again, but we feel like already it's resonated. We've gotten good feedback. And once again, from Detroit, Michigan, it's an honor to have Nate. You're not only on board here with us in the editorial staff, but as of this week again, you're a partner, and as we introduce corporate reformation as well. Now that you're a partner, things are gonna change, but at the same time, the focus is again on the content here. And I think we've got a great vision and outline for the future. I'm really looking forward. This is going to be a great summer because I think we're going to hit our stride in a big way.
I hope so. So, well, man, we've been doing this about almost 100 minutes. So I think.
Yeah, we're going to sign off, give people a break, and I definitely. I don't know about you. I'm definitely looking forward to the feedback because I know there was specifically a contingent. About 8% of our viewership is in the sovereign state of California, and it's where my in-laws are, and the aforementioned Councilman Cameron Hamilton. I'm looking forward to hearing his feedback. I know necessarily everything's not what they want to hear or anybody wants to hear, particularly on every issue, but I think that's the whole point of ModState, is that we can come together in this place, what's truly a safe space, because you can come in and, again, as long as it's not calling for heads to roll literally, you can say it and we can have a discussion, bounce these things off of one another, and it's not going to come from us, the condemnation. We can't control others, but at any rate, this has been the ModState. Nate Wellline up in Detroit, Michigan. I'm Jonathan Deviney once again down here in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we're going to sign off. But thank you, all of you, for listening, and then thanks, Nate, for being here.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Great start.
All right. Strength and honor, brother.
All right, brother. Strength and honor. Take care.
Rob.